Hi, farmers. My name is Janine Ryan. I am the editor of Farmers Weekly magazine. Foot and mouth disease has been in the spotlight recently, particularly following Quran Beef reporting an outbreak at their Heidelberg feedlot earlier this month. Farmers and consumers have been left concerned about the impact this might have on weaner and carcass prices. Many are also wondering what exactly government and industry is doing to hopefully quell this further spread of the disease. To discuss this with me today is Stewald Olivier, CEO of Red Meat Industry Services, or RMIS. Hello, Dewald. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Janine. A pleasure to be here.
Okay, so I think let's just start off with maybe the most basic of all questions, which is what is foot and mouth disease and how does an animal contract it? How does it spread? And and is it a concern for consumers?
Okay, to start off with, I'm not a veterinarian, so this is in layman's terms how I understand foot and mouth disease specifically, and how it's contracted and so on. So, foot and mouth disease there's a difference between foot and hand, foot, and mouth disease that humans normally contract. Now, the hand, foot, and mouth disease that humans normally contract, as they say, it's children playing in sand pits, and it happens there. But foot and mouth disease in cattle is something totally different. It's a virus. It is transmitted in many ways. Nose to nose contact. There's been some research with regards to mechanical transfer. People can actually also transfer the disease. And well, recently we've been seeing that there's still a lot of research that needs to be done with regards to possibly airborne transmission. So there are a lot of ways that it could possibly be transferred, but what we normally see is like I said, nose to nose, or people can transfer it. Yes, and it is so it affects cattle in that normally in their tongues, and that's why it's foot and mouth. The mouth part of it is on the tongues. The epithelials gets damaged, and it's almost like cold sores that the animals get on their tongues. And then also there's lesions or their hoofs get some sores on it. And we've seen recently that the sores on the hoofs are actually much less than what we saw in previous years. But the lesions and the sores in the mouth are where the main visibility of the disease are.
So, can you speak to the sort of mortality of the disease? Because, from my knowledge of it, and also I'm not a vet or anything like that, but from my knowledge of it, the mortality rate is very, very low. So why is it such a big problem, if your herd gets infected?
So the mortalities are actually minuscule, or there hasn't been a lot, and it normally happens in very, very young calves. We've seen the disease very severe in naive herds like the dairy cattle. And specifically, the teats, they really mastitis, that is really a massive problem. But deaths, or mortalities, as you say, not many of it. Now, the problem is, and the whole issue, as you say, what's the problem then? The fact is, the SAT strains that we have in the Southern Africa, the SAT 1, 2, and 3, is not comparable to the, as we call it, the exotic types that do not necessarily, are not necessarily in Africa or close to us, the O and the A types that they normally get in Europe. That disease kills the animals, and there's a mortality rate that is very, very high. But we see that the cattle is sick for 4 or 5 days, they get healed, and then they continue as normal. So this is, and we see it totally, and we've coined it previously as a political disease. But the mortality rate is very, very low. It also differs from hand, foot, and mouth disease that we get, that the children normally get when they play in infected sandpits. It's not the same, it's totally different. In cattle, this is a specific virus, and it's not transferable to humans.
So if you're a farmer and you have cattle with FMD, that confirmed FMD and whatnot, what can you sort of expect to see in your herd? What can you expect to see in terms of production and efficiency and that sort of thing?
So the first signs that you would recognize is a lot of salivation. They drool a lot, and we've seen previously that the cattle, it seems like they are chewing their tongues. It's as if they're eating bubble gum.
Okay.
They would normally not eat that well. And some animals have been seen to lie down, and obviously, I think it's because their tongues are sore and it's hurting. But other than that, like I said, normally after vaccination, it's 3 or 4 days, then they're up again. Then these sores heal. Also, we've seen lesions and sores between the hooves. But as of late, I can tell you that that has been actually also a lot less on the hooves. Yeah, so the biggest thing is salivation. You'll see that there will be excessive salivation in the mouths.
Okay. And in terms of sort of economic losses, does it affect the production of your herd?
Definitely. Obviously, if the animals are on the veld, it's something different. They'll heal and they go on a feedlot when they feed. To lose 3 or 4 or even 5 days of the animal not eating, that has got a definite effect on weight gain and in an economic loss. So there are specific economic losses there. But overall, it is short-lived if you look at the disease itself.
Hmm.
Um, the quicker they heal, obviously, the better. But there are 3, 4, 5 days that they do not necessarily eat as well.
So I think we did an article recently about the RMI is calling for sort of reclassification of the strains at the WOAH, which ties in with what you said earlier about, the sort of what do you call them? The exotic strains are far more deadly than our local strains. So do you think that there will actually be any headway? Because, like you said, it's a political disease. So do you think there'll actually be any headway in that regard?
Yeah, we are very we see World Organization of Animal Health who are obviously, and I don't want to call it protectionism, but it is a bit of Eurocentric, and it looks different to us as African farmers and nations. And we feel that, like you said, our strain is totally different than the O's and the A types. That being said, Janine, I need to tell you that even though we haven't had a foot and mouth disease-free status for a very long time now, we've been
Mhm.
engaging our trade partners, and we actually increased the number of exporting or importing countries that we do business with. So even though we don't have a status with HUA, our bilateral trade agreements has increased, and we are doing more business than before we had a status at
Mm,
then that stage OIE. So it's all about explaining to our trade partners what we're doing, how we protecting ourselves, and how we protecting the industry. And that's why a plan is so important, not necessarily only for HUA, but for ourselves to say, this is the way that we treat this disease, or we handle this
mm,
disease in South Africa.
mm. Um, so I think maybe it's also just a good idea to provide us, if you can, with a sort of status update, the current condition of FMD in South Africa. So I'm sure people watching this would know that there's been various sort of outbreaks in the recent past across, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 provinces. Um, so yeah, so can you just give us a sort
Yeah.
of a quick
So
update on what's going on?
okay, so what's very important in the way that we talk, we need to be very clear on this. If we call it an outbreak, we must understand it's a new uh, situation whereby foot and mouth disease has surfaced. Sometimes and normally, this is not necessarily new outbreaks because it is cattle that is moved from one region to another region.
Mm,
So that is not necessarily an outbreak, but it is that specific cattle that has infected other cattle.
mm.
So just to get the context right. So
And
it's not
also,
like
outbreak doesn't mean like hundreds of animals. It could be like 1 or 2 animals.
correct. Now, that, yes, you're 100% correct. The fact is that we've seen that, for example, if we use the Karen beef example in Heidelberg, that the fact that Karen beef has got foot and mouth disease, that it has also, obviously, they contracted from somewhere, and now that the surrounding farms have also tested positive to foot and mouth disease. We've seen, uh, I want to say, an uprising, but I think because everybody is now again looking for it. There's a renewed look and search for the specific disease, which actually should always be there. We've seen like Gauteng at this stage and it's SAT2 and 3 virus. So it comes from, we think from KZN. KZN is really a hotspot at this stage, the northwestern part. The virus is, to our opinion, or in our opinion, circulating there. And yes, we've also seen, luckily, not in every other province. Free State, I know that they've took samples and it came back clean. We saw Northwest, and again, it's not a new outbreak and something that just started. The assumption that we have is that it's cattle that was moved from an infected area to there and infected it. So to call it an outbreak, we must be very careful about that. It is cattle that's being moved and infecting other cattle. So Northwest is affected at this stage. Gauteng is affected, and also KZN is heavily affected. The other provinces are fairly quiet. We haven't seen anything, and there are an increased surveillance that's being done at this stage, visual surveillance specifically, as we've done it in the past 5 years to look for symptoms.
Okay. So the Karen beef thing, I think this is sort of like people who are not in farming, who never speak about farming. Suddenly, everyone is talking about FMD. Like you said, it's really put it in the spotlight. I think across all industries, everyone is now talking about FMD. But I think that sort of started with the Karen beef Heidelberg feedlot outbreak. But what are the broader implications for the industry? Because obviously, I think it's the biggest feedlot in South Africa, or the biggest feedlot in the Southern Hemisphere. So it's like a massive, massive, producer, really.
I think just on that, and if you look at Heidelberg only, I mean, they've got an excess of 110,000 cattle standing there. So it is an immense operation, and the peripheral industries surrounding it. I mean, you talk to Grain SA and the maize producers. I mean, they buy hominy chop from farmers, so they are influenced. Then you look at, just if I jump a little bit further, let's call it medicine, and additives to the feed. Thirdly, so they are impacted. You look at, we don't normally think about it, but the hides and the skins. I mean, we know about a factory that is set up within South Africa that gets almost all their hides and skins from Karen beef, and they export 95% of that for leather, for car seats, for steering wheels, and all of that. Now, currently, they're standing for the past 3 weeks, not getting any hides and skins in, so they can't export. So peripheral damage, the peripheral impact, not necessarily only damage, but impact that it has is massive. I think Karen beef from their side did the math, and they said that roughly about 55,000 jobs are affected by the situation that Karen beef is currently in. I mean, they've got around about 3,500 people working for them, so it's affected. Now, these people are not being laid off as yet, but they're affected by the situation. They've all in service still or on leave. But the bigger effect of this. Now, we are in a squeeze, and we need to also understand that before Karen beef got positive with foot and mouth disease, we already had a shortage of, as we call it, fat cattle or slaughter-ready cattle. And it's because of the drought that happened last year, up until October. We must remember it didn't rain a lot. We only started with our rains in November. And up until then, a lot of farmers slaughtered either their calves or their older cows. And it created a shortage of slaughter-ready cattle, not beef per se. And that created this squeeze of pricing. And when Karen stopped being able to slaughter, that just exacerbated the squeeze. So we're in a situation currently whereby we see very high prices at the retailers. Luckily, the winter calf prices is still high, and farmers, I think, is still getting price. But we don't know what's going to happen when they start slaughtering, how this will be affected. So overall, as a big feedlot and a very big player and role player within our industry, it has an effect on a lot of people and a lot of, I think, trust. I'm also speaking at one of the commercial banks, in a risk setup as to how does investors look at us, and how we're dealing with this current outbreak.
So, how long is it going to take Karen Beef to sort of get back into operation? I mean, what is the process that they're going through at the moment that's sort of still halting, slaughtering?
Okay, so I mean, let's just take Heidelberg again. It's 110,000 odd cattle, and they received 45,000 doses to vaccinate. Now, how it works is, and the protocol is, um, there's two parts to it. Either once you've vaccinated all the animals, then, as we call it, a day zero starts. Then 14 days from day zero, you can start slaughtering, or 14 days after you've seen the last clinical case. Now, clinical cases where there's sores on the tongues and so on, and that needs to be seen by the state vet. Now, Karen and the government and the Department of Animal Health is currently in negotiations with regards to what can be considered as day zero to calculate the 14 days
Mm,
from which they can start with the slaughtering. It's roughly 6 weeks all in all when they will start slaughter, but from day zero. So then it will be slaughter ready. I know that the abattoir at this stage is operational again, or they've got the green light to slaughter cattle, but they've lost their export status, so they're not an export abattoir anymore.
mm,
Yeah, so it's going to take time. It's going to take,
mm,
let's say, at least 6 weeks from, we don't know yet what date
mm.
they'll be able to slaughter.
So, and they have to vaccinate all the animals first.
Okay, so it. It becomes very technical, but they don't have to vaccinate all the cattle. The cattle
Mm,
actually are seem to be vaccinating themselves, if I can call it in layman's terms. The fact that they infect each other means that they've
mm,
got good immunity. It's like in the same way we had in COVID. If you had COVID,
mm.
you were actually immunized
Yeah,
yourself
it's like
naturally.
herd immunity.
Yes, 100%. And it's natural immunization. And that's what's happening currently. So a lot of these cattle are already have had the disease and are starting to heal.
Mm,
So they are naturally immunized.
okay. And then so if you have a cow who had FMD and is no longer has FMD, you can still slaughter them. It's not
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you have to get
100%.
rid of.
No, 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 no,
Okay.
not at all. So we don't have to cull the animals. There are certain specific time periods, and it's technical. I don't want to go into too much detail, but then you
Mm,
need to you lose the fifth quarter or the heads and the feet unless you treat it, when you cook it, and so on at specific degrees. But that's a whole process, and the process
mm,
costs money.
yeah.
So the longer the animal stands after it had foot and mouth disease, the more of the animal, if I can call it that, you can use.
Okay.
So when the cattle are vaccinated in normally outside of a feedlot scenario, then they get F branded on the neck, and it's to show that it's got FMD, and they get a pink or a red ear tag in it. Within the feedlot scenario, they do not necessarily get F branded because they are terminal. They are destined to be slaughtered. So they're not
Mm.
going to get F branded. Feedlot, they normally get F branded to recognize the fact that the cattle has been vaccinated.
But why? Why is it important
Okay.
for buyers or whatever to know that they've been vaccinated?
So the rule that we currently follow within the South African context is, if an animal tests positive for foot and mouth disease, it's not only when they are clinically sick. So if an animal gets tested and its blood tests positive, then it is thought and the assumption is made that that animal has foot and mouth disease. Now, that is
Mm,
part of the plan that we're trying to change with government, to say that if this animal has contracted in the past foot and mouth disease and it now serologically tests positive, it doesn't mean it is currently sick and spreading the disease. Uh,
Mm.
it's for the same reason. If you test me now for COVID, I'm going to test positive for COVID because I had COVID. But it doesn't mean
Mm.
I'm sick at this stage and I'm transmitting a disease.
Yeah.
So it's very, there are some technicalities surrounding that as well, because he could be a carrier of the disease.
Mm.
That's the principle in it, because you can see that I had previously contracted foot and mouth, or COVID, not me foot and mouth, but the animals that contracted. It doesn't mean that they're sick now. So
Mm.
there's, and it's, again, it's very technical, but the vaccine that we want to create, we call it a DIVA vaccine. And a DIVA stands for differentiation between infected and vaccinated animals. So
Mm.
then we can, after we have administered a DIVA vaccine, you can recognize whether or not it had the disease or it was vaccinated. Uh,
Mm.
and that's one of the reasons why we say we would like to see whether or not it's F branded, because then we know it's vaccinated. Because if you don't know, and that cattle ends up in a facility, for example, in an abattoir, let's
Mm.
say a farmer has in cattle and it isn't, and he sells it to an abattoir, and they slaughter the animal and they pull it, because then they see, look at the tongues and they see there's sores on the tongue, healed. Even if it's healed, they need to report that. And once it's reported and it's serologically positive, then it is seen to be foot and mouth disease positive. And that's the reason why you need to understand whether or not cattle has, and you can only slaughter that cattle at a designated foot and mouth disease abattoir in the current
Okay.
situation that we're in. Um,
Mm.
and that's a negotiation we're trying to have with government, to say, let's look at this differently, because there is other ways we need to look at dealing with this disease specifically.
Mm. Mm. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, Minister John Steenhuisen recently confirmed that 43 million has been allocated for vaccines, with over 900,000 doses already rolled out, and a second batch on the way from Botswana. So, what's your assessment of the scale and the pace of this rollout?
Um, we've got 13 million cattle in South Africa, and we know that we need to constantly vaccinate cattle in the northern parts, where our borders are very porous. And the obviously the 900,000 doses is very welcome, but we're going to need a lot more. And
Mm.
the discussions between us and the minister's office, and also specifically the department, and from DDG Saragi's level with us, is really that we need to look at re-establishing the creation or the manufacturing of our own vaccine.
Mm.
We've got immensely good vaccine that was invested into at ARC, that we can utilize within South Africa. The problem is commercialization, and getting ARC and OBP ready to manufacture this vaccine on a bigger scale.
Mm.
If we look at 50,000, let's say 100,000 doses a month, we're going to continually vaccinate against foot and mouth disease in our country. It's important to understand that we will not eradicate foot and mouth disease. It
Mm.
is a disease that we will have to manage. And I think we're at that stage where we understand that um, we need to be realistic with regards to this disease. Like I said, we've got porous borders. I'm on a WhatsApp group where we see animals actually coming in from our neighboring countries,
Mm.
specifically Mozambique and Zimbabwe, where they look at it differently. They've got no control over the disease, and it enters into South Africa, and it spread the disease as well. So it's really important that we keep on vaccinating, and like you earlier said, the herd immunity, and build up a resilience with regards to this, and then brand these animals so that we know where they are.
Mm.
That being said, the 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 plan that we've got on the table is to say that even though these cattle are vaccinated, we can then bring them into our systems if we've got the opportunity to vaccinate in compartments. And that's the plan that we want to present to government, to say that we understand that we cannot vaccinate the entire herd. I mean, to vaccinate 13 million cattle at 100 Rand a dose, where's that money coming from? But if we look at
Mm.
compartments, and I'm not saying feedlots, I'm saying specifically compartments, where
Mm.
We vaccinate cattle when they enter the compartment. And yes, there's a lot of requirements and dealings we need to look at, but that can be done. And the feedlot owners and the compartment owners are willing to pay for vaccine then we can create immunity and sustainability for our industry. The problem is, all in this, and no vaccine, and the right vaccine.
Mm. So, so why can't I, as a farmer, though, go out and buy an FMD vaccine? Why does it have to be administered by the state veterinarian? I mean, we vaccinate against like brucellosis, where a farmer goes and buys brucellosis to vaccinate his heifers. Why is it a similar program not usable for FMD?
So from a World Organization of Animal Health, WOA's perspective, this is a state-governed disease. Government needs to manage this disease. And I think, again, back to WOA, the fact is how they see it as animals die. So it creates an international issue in layman's terms again when animals contract foot and mouth disease. But ours are different. But we are actually put in the same position as those diseases in the Northern Hemisphere. And because this is a state-controlled disease, that responsibility lies with government to look after vaccine, for example, to look at management, etc., etc. So there's a responsibility on them. And again, I would like to say that we work very closely with government to try and curb the disease and ensure that we've got vaccine, etc. I mean, we can now, as industry, procure the vaccine. We've got the right to procure it or buy. For example, Karen Beef has the ability and the right to go and buy the vaccine themselves, but it needs to still go through OBP and be administered by the department. But there's a possibility to do it on their own if they've got the money to do it themselves. And that is a move in the right direction. And I think that is the start of a PPP between us and government.
Mm, mm. I mean, it seems to me that the issue that we have with FMD, or at least the spread of FMD, is down to the fact that cattle are being moved all the time. I mean, that's obviously almost impossible to stop entirely because it's part of the industry. But what impact has these movement restrictions particularly had on the red meat value chain? So I remember a few years ago, I can't, maybe 2, 3 years ago, when we had another big FMD problem, and auctions were cancelled and all of that, and it had a very big impact on the red meat industry as a whole. Are we seeing a similar thing at the moment? Because I'm still going to auctions. I'm not seeing the same sort of level of cancellation and that sort of thing.
No, we will. I think that was. I want to say. I would like to use a mistake. We should never have stopped the movement at that stage. The fact is, I think we will never stop the movement of cattle in South Africa, and we should not cancel any auctions. The auction should continue. I think we need to look at self-regulation in the sense that we need to look at our neighbor, ourselves, and say, how do we and what do we allow at auctions? Auctions plays a very important role within the red meat value chain. It's part and parcel of the value chain, and it's very important. And we need to look at biosecurity at these auctions. And if we talk biosecurity, I mean, the auctioneers can only do that much with regards to the animals that is brought, but we need some sort of a block and a buffer there to say that we will only accept X, Y, or Z. And if we talk X, Y, or Z, branded animals, we will accept animals that are individually identified. We will accept animals that come from a specific region which we know are not FMD positive at this stage. So, for example, if you send animals currently from the disease management area, there's also high risk and low risk where the current virus is circulating. You'll be, I mean, it would not be very wise to buy animals from that specific area. However, the DMA is vast. And there are specific places where the risk is so low with regards to the spread of the disease. And if you've got a veterinarian that did a animal health verification or a health declaration on your farm, then the risk is very low. to think, and I think that's very important. Sometimes I hear people say, but we need to set up roadblocks. We need to get the police up and running. We need to get the state involved with regards to roadblocks. That's not, I mean, it's not going to happen. We
Mm,
need to, as an industry, protect ourselves. And we see it at
mm,
RMIS and the people that support us saying that this is our industry. Yes,
mm,
FMD specifically is a state-governed disease or managed disease, but we need to look after ourselves. Government do not
mm,
own cattle. Government is not necessarily moving the cattle themselves, but we have to take control and responsibility for this. And we need to create something that works for us. We are
mm,
busy with the plan, and we're going to put this plan in front of the department and say, please assist us in ensuring that we are safe and we can do business.
mm,
Um, Janine, I think the problem that we currently sit in is the risk is just getting too big. I didn't go into detail with regards to the numbers of Karen beef earlier, and I don't think it's necessary, but I can tell you that they have to make real decisions whether or not they're continuing with business,
mm,
because this is a massive risk. They cannot contract this disease, start slaughtering, and then be closed down again. I think no, there's very few compartments, feedlots, call it what you want, that will survive an outbreak of foot and mouth disease twice.
mm. So, I mean, uh, how much does it cost to test an animal for FMD? I mean, isn't it a practical solution to just test every animal that you buy?
Yeah. So yes, it's very expensive. So it's expensive to do the test. It's about, according to my knowledge and understanding, and I'm stand to be corrected, it's around about 1,000 rand to test the animal.
Okay,
Okay.
so if you're buying a
That
lot
is,
of animals, that's a lot of money.
it's a lot of money. The
Mm.
fact is, the vaccine is 49 rand.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The administered vaccine is 49 rand. So test that or put that in perspective with regards to 1,000 rand of testing. There are cheaper tests that can be done, 10 pen site tests and cheaper tests, if I can call it that. I mean, worldwide, these tests exist. Um, Back to the plan, we need to think out of the box. We are stuck in my opinion, pre-1994 thinking with regards to this disease. And
Mm.
we need to think differently. One of the things, and I'm a bit veering off here, but Saudi Arabia, when they engaged us from the start, they said they are willing to take, they actually asked us, they want vaccinated animals. They are a beef from vaccinated cattle. So our trade partners would definitely look favorable to receiving meat or beef specifically from animals that were vaccinated. We have to look at the finding the middle ground in testing, and we also need to look at alternative laboratories. I mean, we're
Mm.
currently using only TAD. It's at OBP, the Transboundary Disease Center, which we need to get up to a standard again that is we've been or we was in the past, um, the knowledge base of Africa, and we need to
Mm.
be back there. And we would like as an industry to see that TAD regains its rightful place. But we would also need to look at alternatives with regards to laboratories. There are ways to make this cheaper and more,
Mm.
let's say cheaper, but more affordable in testing specific samples of cattle.
Mm. Mm. This is quite an interesting one, I think. So we've heard that some farmer associations have called for a state of disaster to be declared in response to the severity of the current FMD problem. What is your view on that? Do you think it would actually help?
I
Because
think
I mean, I see it as you still sort of sit with the same problem. You can call a state of disaster, but we still don't really have any new solutions at the moment, it seems.
um, the state of the disaster. I would like to. I'm going to veer a little bit political.
Mm,
We voted that we do not increase our VAT, which means that we don't have money in the fiscus. If we declare a state of disaster, there's a lot of money that needs to be poured out or poured into um, that specific region. Now, there's a
mm,
flip side of the coin. We've got the Animal Diseases Act currently saying that if you have foot and mouth disease and the animals are then culled or whatever, if that's the route that it's going, and that's why animals are not culled, the farmer needs to be compensated, etc., etc. Or money needs to be released, for example, for roadblocks and the likes, if it's a state of disaster. The problem is a socioeconomic and a South African problem. We know that we have got a police force that is understaffed. So where are these people going to come from, even if we have the money to set up these roadblocks? So it's an overall issue. It's not necessarily only declaring a disaster. And we've noted that, and we've seen the state of disaster. In my opinion, we think again, we need to think differently. We need to say, how do we address this problem by assisting these farmers that did contract foot and mouth disease? And we must remember, we cannot only help commercial farmers. There's emerging small-scale farmers that also do not have access to specific markets at this stage. So it's a lot of people that we need to assist. And do we maybe, I'm thinking, do we set up a fund that is an industry fund managed to assist these farmers in specific situations? But to keep on looking to government to assist us in doing this on our behalf is not the answer. But that being said, back to this is a state or a government managed disease. And I think that's maybe the question or the discussion we need to have. If we change the narrative at HOA, and we can change the narrative within the South African context on what you do with your animals once they're positive, then we don't have, and we wouldn't have the problem whereby we've got a situation where we declare a DMA and people can't move their animals. And that's the big issue. People sit in the DMA in the KZN currently and they can't move their animals. And the frustration, it's a boiling pot of emotions, understandably so. But if we've got a plan on the table to say, if you don't have a circulating virus and your animals are vaccinated, let's put them in a feedlot where they can be bought by the feedlot owner, slaughtered normally through a normal process, and then sold, because there's nothing wrong with the meat. There's nothing wrong with the animal once they're healed. And that's what we're calling for, a reform with regards to the thinking about this disease.
And I think it's crucial because we clearly can't carry on in the same way that we're doing it now. Something needs to give at some point. Okay, so what steps do you think needs to be taken to regain our FMD free status?
The most important thing, Janine, what we need to do now is we need to protect our farmers. We need to protect our value chain before we look at regaining our status with the World Organization of Animal Health. If we don't protect our value chain, there's nothing that we want to apply to. I mean, there will be no value chain. There will be no farmers, because farmers are losing their farms. Feedlots are closing down. Abattoirs are closing down. So our first step, our immediate attention needs to be focused on saving the industry. Then we can look at steps at saying, how do we regain our status? But if we look at international other countries, for example, and there are many, just to highlight Brazil, Uruguay, Mexico, Argentina, these guys all vaccinate and they still export, and but they've put this down on an international platform and say, this is how we do business. I previously mentioned that even though we've got no status, we increased exports to other countries. So yes, regaining our HOA status is very, very important. But now we need to focus on keeping farmers on their farms, being able to succeed in farming. And that's a medium to a long-term plan. And once we've got a situation whereby we say, are we vaccinating in compartments, we can say, what is the need for regaining status and how are we going to do it? Is it important? Yes, to play in the international realm. Totally agree with that. But if we're in a situation now, and I'm repeating myself, where farmers are no longer there, what are we going to apply for?
No, there's no industry to save if there are no farmers.
100%.
Yeah, so Brazil's an interesting case in point because, I mean, I think they're the biggest producers and exporters of beef in the world. Do they vaccinate in compartments, or do they vaccinate their entire herd?
So what they did was they actually broke it up in provinces. So they had a northern part and a southern part, but they had immense good surveillance and movement controls. So you couldn't move cattle over a specific borderline, for example, What they also have is they've got wet borders and dry borders. Wet borders is like a river, which cattle could not cross. So yes, and it took them, I think, took them all in all 50 years to be where they
Oh,
are. We
wow.
don't have 50 years.
Yeah.
We're in a situation, well, luckily we don't have, or unlucky, I don't know, they have got 200 or 230 million cattle, uh,
Mm,
where we've sit with roughly 13 million. And we need to work out something that works for us in South Africa. We are,
mm,
that's saying a boer maak 'n plan, and we need to really, I implore each and every one we need to think out of the box with regards to how we deal with it in South Africa. Can we learn from the Brazilians? Definitely. Can we learn from Argentina? We've got a group set up which we are going to visit them and understand what they did, and not necessarily how they did it, because we understand how they did it in the country, but how they approached the rest of the world with regards to
mm,
vaccination and putting their position on the ground to say, this is what we're doing, having a plan. All our trade
mm,
partners and everybody is asking, what's the plan? If we understand the plan, we know where we're going, and then we will have comfort with regards to how we deal with this disease.
mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, 50 years. I didn't think it took that long.
No.
That's insane. That's a long time. So finally, is there any like advice or message that you want to give to cattle farmers out there?
I think there's two parts to it. The one is, are these farmers that are currently affected by foot and mouth disease in the specific areas. I think they're going through an immensely tough time. I've seen the frustration. I hear I get the calls. I deal with the frustration on a daily basis. Hang on, we've got a plan coming. And I think we have got the ear of the Department of Animal Health and Department of Agriculture at this stage to say, how do we look at alternative ways in dealing with this disease? The collaboration between us and the department is, I think, the best it has ever been. And there is definitely a very good collaboration with regards to finding solutions. Um, we cannot discount the fact that for 20 years we did it in a certain way, and we cannot keep on doing it the same way and expect a different outcome. And I think that's where um, the connect is between us and government, is we understand that we need to treat this differently. We need to open this up so that we've got access for all cattle farmers within South Africa, irrespective of where they sit in the value chain. And so each and every farmer, I'd like to just encourage them and say, this too shall pass. We've come through very bad times in the past, and this is, in my opinion, to use the words of some of the guys that we've spoken to in the industry that currently has foot and mouth. It's a watershed moment in our industry, and how we're going to deal with this going forward. It will change.
Mm. Well, thank you very, very much, Devolt. I think that was very enlightening. Um, yeah, actually, I look forward to what the RMIS is going to propose. I think you guys have done a great job so far
Thank you.
in trying to firstly curb panic, because I think there's been a lot of panic around,
Yes.
um, but also in the strategies and things that you've been putting forward. So we really, really appreciate that.
We we don't want it necessarily, and people ask us, but why aren't we saying something? We
Mm,
want to speak only the truth, firstly, and secondly, put out once we've done something. I mean, we previously referred to the operations center. We're now putting in a veterinarian to drive it. We've had so many discussions and um, seeing how to deal with it. But I don't want to add to the noise, and I think that's the big thing. We don't
mm,
want to feed on this on the fear. We would like to put tangible, workable solutions on the table for the value chain to say this is how we're going forward. And that's, I think, the main reason why we're saying we only communicate once we've done something, and we look forward and putting actually some more stuff on the table. Phase 2 is almost finished of the operations center, whereby we will engage with farmers in the community and movement of cattle specifically, and also get questions back and report back to them. But please feel free on our website, rmis.co.za. There is a diagram or a chart of South Africa, whereby you can exactly see where the current outbreaks are, circles if you throw a dart, if I can call it that, with a 10-kilometer radius where all the current situations are. I think farmers and people should go there and look at it and see where this is currently going.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Janine.